In September 2013, Speaker of the House of Representatives Wade Mark declared the parliamentary seat of Hubert Volney, Member of Parliament for St. Joseph, vacant. This was precipitated by Volney being fired as Minister of Justice in the People's Partnership Government over the early proclamation of Section 34 of the Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Act 2011, following which Volney resigned from the United National Congress. It was the first time a member's seat has been declared vacant under the Crossing of the Floor Act.
Those events, I think, were cataclysmic in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, in that you had an unprecedented scenario whereby you actually had someone who was a Minister of Justice admitting eventually in his mea culpa that the information he gave to the cabinet was inaccurate, and if you recall, that information appeared to form the bedrock of the subsequent legislation, which, as later events unfolded, revealed that there were other objectives behind that legislation.
Mr. Volney resigned from the UNC around July or August of 2013, and that resignation was used as the basis by the Prime Minister to seek to have his seat declared vacant. The difference in that particular situation was that Section 76(1)(a) of the Constitution, that is one of the two grounds on which you can be appointed Prime Minister, specifically says that the person appointed as Prime Minister will be the leader of the party that has a majority of seats. Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar had been appointed under Section 76(1)(a), and as a consequence of that, she was clearly identified as the leader of the party that had a majority of seats. In that context, Speaker Wade Mark declared Mr. Volney's seat vacant. There were no legal challenges that emerged, and a by-election was held.
Attempts to remove sitting parliamentarians under the Crossing of the Floor Act had failed in the past, as was the case with Hector McLean, Hulsey Bagan, Vincent Lass, and Dr. Rupert Griffith. The parliamentary reality had now changed in the Trinidad and Tobago House of Representatives.
Political party had the power to enforce discipline over a member to ensure that the member did not contravene or undermine the policy of the party. It did not mean that anything that you disagree with normally should be the basis of having your seat declared vacant, but it gave to the leader of the political party power to remove members of parliament who did not fall in line, give the party that discretion to have the person removed.
In a sense that if it is that persons elect someone under the banner of a political party, and their vote may have been not just for the individual, but also for the party that they represent. In that sense, I can understand that, look, if it is that you choose to swear allegiance, or you have disaffections with your allegiance to the party under whose banner you ran, then obviously in those circumstances, it's only fair to the electorate to have an opportunity to put who they wish in the place. But the corollary to that is you also do not wish to stifle independent expression of thought, ideas from someone who may be under your banner, but may not agree with you on a particular point.
And with Volney's parliamentary seat being declared vacant, there were implications for the parliamentary politics of Trinidad and Tobago.
The move by the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, to invoke this crossing the floor strategy may have caused some ministers and some others in the party at the time to think twice about whether they would want to cross the floor. And in those circumstances, I think that it is possible, and this is pure speculation, it is possible that the invocation of the Crossing the Floor strategy in September of 2013 may have caused any further defections not to take place, and it may have given the People's Partnership 2 further years of life in office as a consequence of it.
Well, I think it gave a signal to individuals who were going into politics that they must be prepared, that if they want to stand up for their principles and their conscience, they must be prepared to face the music.
If you contest on a party ticket, the idea is that you would have gotten support because of the party and not as the individual candidate. Whereas on the other hand, it isn't, because if you then think the party has gone contrary to the very manifesto on which you were elected and which the party had promised to deliver to the people various commitments, then you could say, well, the party has erred. So if you cross the floor because the party has erred and broken its commitment and social contract with the people, you have done nothing wrong. The party has done nothing wrong. So you shouldn't be punished for that regard. So it's a more complex issue, and what really therefore we require is constitutional reform and a greater awareness by citizens about the role of parliamentarians as representatives of them, not as representatives of the party.
The problem is we have adopted this all or nothing approach in Trinidad and Tobago, that it's my way or the highway. So it's either you totally with everything I say, or that means you're against me, so get out.
And with the successful invocation of the Crossing of the Floor Act for the first time in the parliamentary life of Trinidad and Tobago, there were lessons to be learned and considerations for the evolution of parliamentary politics.
When you look at it in hindsight, I think it's only one way it could have ended, and it could never have ended well for the minister who came forth ultimately and admitted his role in the entire debacle.
Well, I think the 2013 events with regard to Mr. Volney and the Crossing the Floor situation was one in which I think the public came face to face with the issue of a member of parliament being required to vacate his seat because he changed his allegiance by his own volition. So that this was not a case where the UNC expelled him. This was a case where he resigned from the UNC and made it public. So that in that context, I think the consequence was that the issue of political allegiance was tied to your tenure as a member of parliament. And I think that is still very much the case.
It remains to be seen whether the long-term effect will be positive or negative for the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago.
It makes politicians sycophants, and they become subservient to their leaders, and it gives leaders great power over their members. I think it is not in the public interest.
The lesson from that Section 34 debacle was the Parliament ought not to be used for personalization of legislation to benefit or profit a few. It can never be. That's not the purpose of our laws. That's not the purpose of our lawmakers. And if you subscribe to that oath, if you hold to that higher standard, then you would understand that that ought never to have happened. And certainly it ought never to happen again in the life of the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament.